Okay. Welcome. A lot to talk about tonight. We'll let a few people get established as we get the live stream up and running here. Little bit frazzled starting off. I apologize if I seem a bit discombobulated. Just a few minutes before I went live, my dog Murphy had a seizure and I had to deal with that. So it's got me a little bit on edge, but I think that we'll be okay as we go forward. But anyway, welcome to the show. My name is Brian Schott. This is What the Heck is Happening in Utah Politics. That's my dog stomping down the stairs is the big noise you hear. That's the one that just had the seizure. But welcome into the show. My name is Brian Schott. This is What the Heck is Happening in Utah Politics. I am the publisher and managing editor of Utah Political Watch. You'll find us online at utahpolitics.news. That's Murphy. You can probably see her coming in the shot, at least in the landscape shot on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch. She's a little confused after having a seizure earlier, but I think we'll just go forward with it. She just needs a little attention. So she's going to lay here at my feet. And if you hear her panting, that's just because it's the aftermath of a seizure. This life with an aging dog is what happens. But, just try to make their time with us as much as possible. All right. As nice as possible. Okay, let's start this again. Welcome into the show. It is Thursday, May 7th, 2026. This is What the Heck is Happening in Utah Politics. I am Brian Schott, the managing editor and publisher of Utah Political Watch. You'll find us online at utahpolitics.news. And the main reason I wanted to talk about tonight, the main reason I wanted to come on live tonight, somebody's saying they're having no audio on Facebook. I don't know why they don't have any audio on Facebook, because everybody else seems to be getting audio. I know I'm sending it out. Yeah, we've got audio everywhere else. I just don't know audio. I don't know why you're not getting audio on Facebook. That's not happening on our end. But you can find us at YouTube. We're on a couple of Facebook places. But I don't know why you're not getting any audio. Everything should be fine. So let's try it again. Let's start over. Start here from the beginning as we get all the technical issues worked out. This is What the Heck is Happening in Utah Politics. I'm Brian Schott, the publisher and managing editor of Utah Political Watch. You'll find us online at utahpolitics.news. And we've got a lot to talk about. We just did a live on Tuesday night. I wanted to come back on here tonight because we've had some stories. I broke a pretty big story on Wednesday about the data center, MIDA. We're going to talk about that. I'm going to walk through some of the things that happened. We've also had some other developments with the data center as well. So we're going to talk about some of those things. I'm going to walk you through this story that I broke yesterday, if you haven't seen it already, and answer your questions, get your thoughts on it, what you're thinking about. And so that is what we're going to be doing tonight. Plus, if you have any questions, any comments on anything else, feel free to leave them in the chat, and I will get to them as I can. So, you may be asking yourself, what is Utah Political Watch? I'm an independent journalist, been covering Utah politics for more than 25 years. This is a journalist-owned, journalist-operated news website. And we are supported by our readers. And you can support what I do, my work. You can support it by becoming a paid subscriber or leaving some money in the tip jar. Just go to utahpolitics.news, and all of that helps support what I do. But let's talk about the couple of stories that have popped up in this data center controversy. As you know, the Box Elder County Commission, they approved this data center in northern Utah, this 40,000 acre data center that is backed by Kevin O'Leary and his group. They're going to call it Wonder Valley because he's Mr. Wonderful. And there's been a lot of pushback, a lot of controversy around this. And that makes some sense because people are worried about the environmental impact that this will have. People are worried about how much water this data center is going to use, the amount of power that it's going to produce. They're going to have their own natural gas-fired power plant on site to power this data center, which when they say it's up and running at full capacity, is going to be producing 9 gigawatts of power, which is more than double of what Utah consumes overall. We consume, I think, 4 gigawatts of power a year, and they're going to produce 9. So this is a massive, massive data center project. And if they get to the point of what they say they're going to do with the size of this data center, with this power, it will be the largest data center on the planet. I've spoken to someone who works in the data center world. Their job is building these data centers, and they said this would dwarf anything that we have out there right now. So this is a massive data center project. And it was approved initially, even though the Box Elder County Commission approved it in a vote on Monday. It was initially approved on April 24th by a body called MIDA, the Military Installation Development Authority, MIDA. MIDA is an independent state agency. It's an authority. It was created in 2007, and what it was supposed to do was support development on military land, and it had to provide a benefit to the military. I'm watering it down, but that's what it had to do. And it has done some things related to the military. Done some things that are with its mission. They're involved in moving Fort Douglas. They've done some work on the Dugway Proving Grounds. They've done work with a lot of military installations around the state. They were deeply involved in the construction of Falcon Hill, which is the aerospace hub that opened on Hill Air Force Base. All of those are directly connected to the military, but they've also expanded, and one could argue that they have gone far afield of what they were originally tasked to do, what their original charter was. They have been involved in the building of massive luxury hotels. The big one is the East Village expansion at Deer Valley. They helped build that. They've done some development along the Jordanelle Reservoir. And what MIDA does is they unlock bonding to help pay for infrastructure, to do financing. And they are basically an unelected board. There are 8 members, 7 voting members, and a non-voting member. The non-voting member is the executive director, but there are 7 voting members. And the chair of MIDA is Senate President Stuart Adams. He has served on this board since 2008 when he was originally in the House of Representatives. He was appointed by then Governor Jon Huntsman in 2008. And so that's the background on MIDA. And MIDA, on April 24th, they voted to approve this Project Stratos, this giant data center in northern Utah. And the Box Elder County Commission, they had to vote if they wanted to be involved in have some oversight of the site. It's on some military land. It's on a portion of military land. The rest of it is on privately owned land. And I'm not sure if there's any publicly owned land, but I know a lot of it is on privately owned land and some military land. So that is all to say that is MIDA's involvement in this. And Senate President Stuart Adams is the chair. He essentially runs it. So now let's get to this story that I published on Wednesday. You can read the full story at utahpolitics.news. Just checking on my dog who's adjusting herself. So what happened was the approval, that MIDA vote to approve the data center, was made on April 24th. 7 days later, 5 individuals and corporations that are deeply financially involved in MIDA. They are involved in some of these other MIDA projects. They made 5 donations to Adams Political Action Committee, known as the Adams Leadership PAC, totaling $135,000. This is 7 days after MIDA voted to approve this data center. Now, none of these companies, as far as I can tell, are involved in the data center, but they have reaped some serious financial benefits from being involved with MIDA, and they are basically the go-to entities with MIDA. These are, the first one is Jacobson Construction Company. They donated $40,000 to Adams PAC, his leadership PAC. They were the lead general contractor on several of these MIDA flagship projects. They were the lead general contractor on the Grand Hyatt Deer Valley. That's the luxury hotel that they got financing for and infrastructure funding for through MIDA. And they were also the general contractor on Deer Valley's East Village expansion. The next one is Clausen General Contracting. They donated $25,000 to the Adams Leadership PAC. That group is that company is headed by CEO Brandon Clausen. The company's involved in the Deer Valley East Village build, and they are frequently used on MIDA infrastructure work. The next donation, $25,000, came from Tyler and Jennifer Aldis. Tyler Aldis is the managing director of Sky Ridge Development. That is a residential and recreation project that's on the north shore of the Jordanelle Reservoir, and it's in MIDA's Wasatch County project area. So MIDA did a lot of the improvements and the infrastructure work that allowed this to go in. He also sits on the board of the MIDA Golf and Equestrian Center Public Infrastructure District. That's another thing that MIDA does. They create these public infrastructure districts that and I hope I'm saying this correctly, but they do improvements and upkeep on these areas through local taxes. So they donated $25,000 to Adams Super PAC. Next person is Gary Barnett and his wife Ayala Barnett, another $25,000. Gary Barnett runs a company called Extel Development Company. They are the primary private sector partner on the MIDA's military recreation facility area, which includes the Deer Valley Resort. So all these companies deeply involved and have and are profiting off of these MIDA areas. And the last one, Copper Key Electrical Solutions, they donated $20,000. That's led by Brandon Clausen, and he performed that company performed electrical contracting for the Deer Valley East Village project. So all of these companies are tied to MIDA, and have done work through MIDA, have benefited through this public-private partnership that MIDA creates. So those 5 checks, I went back and looked at this. Those 5 checks, $40,000, 3 checks for $25,000, and 1 for $20,000. Those are the 5 largest donations that have ever been made to this Adams Leadership PAC. This is a political action committee that is completely controlled by Stuart Adams. He has his campaign committee. He also controls this political action committee. And these 5 companies, which have connections to MIDA, donated $135,000. They were the 5 largest donations ever made to that PAC, and they all came on the same day, just a week after MIDA approved this massive 40,000-acre data center in northern Utah. The Adams Leadership PAC has been around since 2019, and up until that time, the largest donation they had taken in was $15,000. And then on one day, May 1st, they got a $40,000 check, 3 $25,000 checks, and a $20,000 check from 5 individuals and companies that are financially dependent on these MIDA projects. Now, as I said before, there's no indication that they are involved in this data center project. There's nothing, there's no indication that they're tied to that. But the timing, even though it was a week after this data center vote, the timing is probably, and I know people are going to disagree with me here, but the timing is probably the least problematic portion of this whole story. Yeah, all of the checks came in on the same day, on May 1st. And if you look at the financial disclosures for the Leadership PAC, there were a number of other groups that donated on May 1st as well. So as far as I can tell, or at least my assumption is that Adams had a fundraiser for this PAC on that day. He would not respond to my questions, so we don't know. But it looks like there was a fundraiser. But even if he did have a fundraiser, these 5 checks for $135,000, the total haul for that day was about $160,000. So the vast majority came from these 5 donors. But the fact that they are deeply enmeshed with MIDA, the fact that they are the recipients of these MIDA dollars that they put into these infrastructure projects, that they have directly benefited, and then they turn around and donate, give the 5 largest checks in the history of Adams' PAC, his leadership PAC. They do the 5 largest checks, and they have business before MIDA. Well, that raises a lot of questions. And, you know, some people are saying, is this illegal? Is it a bribe? I wouldn't call it a bribe. There's no evidence of a quid pro quo. It's not even illegal here in Utah. Utah has some of the loosest campaign finance rules in the entire country. Anybody or any corporation can donate as much as they want to any candidate. There's no limit. They can donate whatever they want. So this is not illegal. And there's no evidence of a quid pro quo. But it is worth pointing out that these 5 donors who just scratched the 5 biggest checks that Adams has ever put into this campaign account, they, have business before this really powerful state agency that Stuart Adams chairs. And there are legitimate questions with that. And he has not answered them. He did not answer the questions that I put to him. And I gave him plenty of chance to reply, and he didn't. So that's the story that I broke yesterday. And there's more to it we'll talk about. But in the first, just at the base level of this story, 5 individuals and companies scratched really big checks for Stuart Adams, and they have business before this powerful state agency that he's in charge of, that he essentially runs, that he has been on since 2008. I don't think that there's any term limits for this MIDA board. But if you look at the things that they've done, they have really expanded far beyond, one could argue, what was initially argued for, what was initially envisioned for the MIDA board. And one of the ways that they've gotten around this thing that has to be a benefit to the military, right? So you have this luxury resort, this luxury hotel at Deer Valley. One of the things the ways they've gotten around that is they say that military members and veterans will get can get a discount when staying there. And that's the benefit that they're providing to the military for this gorgeous luxury hotel in Deer Valley. One could argue that, is beyond the initial scope of this MIDA board. And they're the ones who initially approved this big data center. And that's just something to think about. So anyway, welcome into the show. If you're just joining us, we're talking about the big story that I broke yesterday about Stuart Adams receiving 5 huge checks from donors who are involved with who have business before this very powerful state agency that he just happens to run, that he just happens to chair. So I want to hear what you have to say about that. You can leave your questions and your comments in the chat, and I will get to them as we go on this evening. But I'm so glad to have you on board. Let's see. I'm looking at some of the questions right now. Nathan Detroit, he's one of our subscribers at UtahPolitics.news. He asks, what's the fit for tonight, Brian? Well, I'll back up and show you. I don't know if you watch Creature Commandos. It's an animated series, the DC Comics animated series. James Gunn did it. And the character is G.I. Robot. And the entire thing he does is he wants to kill Nazis. That's why he was created. He was from World War II. He asks people, would you like to kill Nazis with G.I. Robot? And you know what? That's something I can get on board with, because not the killing of people, but Nazis are not a good thing. And the message on my shirt reflects that. Let's see. Rebecca Rodriguez on Facebook says, sweet, no bid contracts to follow. That's what she's thinking about for the data center. And I want to talk about that a little bit, because there's been a lot of speculation going around that Spencer Cox's company, his family company, Centricom, which provides telephone and internet for a lot of rural Utah, is standing to benefit from that. And that's all speculation at this point. That is pure speculation, because there are no contracts. There are no contracts right now. They've just approved the project. So, anybody if you see anybody on social media claiming that Spencer Cox and his family stand to benefit from this data center, if and when it's built, that is all just pure speculation, and it's designed to make you mad. These people don't know what they're talking about, because we haven't had any contracts yet. Let's see. Anita Dalrymple on Facebook says, the important question is, how do we stop them? I don't know how you stop them, because this is not illegal. Like I said, Utah's campaign finance laws are among the most lax in the country. You can take as much money, unlimited amounts of money, from anybody. There's no limit on what they can give you. When you run for office in Congress, you're governed by the Federal Election Commission, and there are limits on what someone can donate. But not here in Utah. If you look at the disclosures for Governor Spencer Cox and his annual fundraising gala, he routinely gets $50,000 checks for that. Like big checks. And those are people who are buying tables at the fundraiser, but that's $50,000 into his campaign account or his political account. And so there's no limits on how much you can give to a candidate. So there's nothing illegal about what these companies did, giving to Adams' super PAC. Or not his super PAC, sorry, Adams' PAC. Nothing illegal there. But is it ethical? That's the question. And I'm going to talk about the second part of the story in a second, which raises even more ethical questions, at least for me, and it should for you. Let's see. Anita Dalrymple says, Adams refused to answer questions related to his last episode. He usually refuses to answer questions related to any episode. The last episode she's referring to is the controversy that popped up last year about Adams' step-granddaughter was arrested, was charged. She was 18 at the time, having sex with a 13-year-old boy, which is rape in Utah. That's a child. A 13-year-old cannot consent to sex, so it is rape. And his 18-year-old granddaughter had sex with a 13-year-old boy a couple of times, and she was charged with felonies because of it. After that happened, and this wasn't disclosed publicly, the fact that his granddaughter was arrested and charged with this wasn't disclosed publicly. But after that happened, Adams quietly helped engineer a change to Utah law. Utah law previously said if you are 17 or younger and have sex with a child, someone who's under the age of 14, which is the age of consent here in Utah, you can be charged as a minor even though it's rape. It's a lesser charge, and that's a third-degree felony, not a first-degree felony. And first-degree felonies require you to register with databases. But Adam's granddaughter was 18, so she was not eligible for that. She was being charged as an adult because legally she's an adult. Well, they changed the law to make it so that in some certain circumstances where an 18-year-old is charged with having sex with someone who is under the age of 14, a child under the age of 14, rape, that if they are still in high school, then they can be charged as a minor and be charged with the lesser the lesser charge, the third degree felony. And that's a circumstance that just so happened to fit his granddaughter. His granddaughter was still in high school when these incidents happened. Now, the law passed. It was not retroactive. It did not directly impact her case. But the prosecutor, the defense attorney, the judge, all of them said that this new law, this change to the law, was a major factor in the fact that his step-granddaughter was offered a plea deal in this case. He did not directly change the law to benefit her, but a change in the law that he engineered did end up benefiting her, and I think she pled guilty to some misdemeanors actually, and it might have been a lesser felony, but it wasn't rape and it wasn't sodomy, which are the things that she was charged with. It was rape and rape of a child. There were 2 first-degree felony counts of rape of a child and 2 first-degree felony counts of forcible sodomy. And she ended up getting a plea deal for a lesser charge, and she didn't have to register with a database for sex offenders. And he really didn't want to answer questions about that last one as well. And if you remember, when I was reporting on this, I got a hold of the letter that he and his wife wrote to the court in support of their granddaughter. And they said this whole incident was because his granddaughter just wanted this young boy, who was 13 at the time, to feel included, because they were all hanging out in part of a friend group, and they became friendly, and then it just led to her having sex with him twice. And she just did it because, initially the friendship started because she wanted him to feel included, which was a really weird thing to say. But that's the last incident that they were referring to. Emma Jolo on YouTube says, "Oh my God, our tax dollars go to the dumbest things that benefit no one but uber rich people." The interesting thing about MIDA, and I'm digging into a lot of this, trying to understand how it works, but it is public money. It is debt. They finance a lot of these projects with bonds that are paid back through tourism taxes, sales taxes. So people who use the facilities pay it back. But they get a big tax break. These companies get a big tax break for doing it. And it also unlocks a lot of this financing to pay for the infrastructure. And it's debt issued by the state. Nathan Detroit says, "I hear Jerry Stevenson," he's also on the MIDA board, Utah Senator Jerry Stevenson, who is retiring after this year. He says, "I hear Jerry Stevenson has been getting a lot of grief at his J&J Nursery and Garden Center in Layton because of his work on MIDA and approving the data center." Yes, he's also been on the MIDA board for a number of years. He was one of the ones who voted to approve this. Channel 4 had some video. They sent a reporter out there to cover these threats and the harassment that was starting to come his way at his business because he voted to approve this data center. And they've got video of Stevenson slapping a phone out of the reporter's hands. It just, that reaction, and I've known Senator Stevenson for a long time. It just shows these are people who are not used to getting this level of scrutiny, getting this level of pushback on things. They usually get what they want and they don't expect this kind of pushback. And there is a lot of pushback. And I think, I'm not defending him. I'm not explaining away what he did, but to slap the phone out of a reporter's hands, that's not a good look. And then he apologized afterwards because he said he didn't know it was a reporter. That's no excuse. That's absolutely no excuse. Looking for some of the other comments. Let's go over to Instagram and see what is happening there. Don't really have any comments on Instagram. If you want to chime in on the discussion, please do. Just leave it in the chat. On TikTok, someone says, how do you concentrate that much energy in one place without environmental disruption? Talking about the natural gas-fired power plant that is slated for this data center in northern Utah. It's initially they're shooting for 3 gigawatts of power, scaling it all the way up to 9. The entire state of Utah uses 4 gigawatts. So that's more than double what the state does. And like I said, if they get up to that, even if they start at 3, that's bigger than any data center we already have. I think the largest one right now that creates its own power is around 2 gigawatts. So this is a massive, massive data center that they want to build. And people are raising concerns about the environmental impact. It's going to create a heat island. You really can't generate that much energy without pumping a lot of heat into the atmosphere. It's going to use a lot of water to cool it down. And we'll talk about the story that came out today that the one of the groups behind this withdrew their permit to get for water for the project, but they say it's not over with, so we'll talk about that as well. Danette on TikTok says, meanwhile, Camp Williams soldiers have almost no air conditioning in their sleeping quarters. The funny thing is, MIDA would not be able to do anything about that unless MIDA decided to build new quarters. But then would you do a public? It's really hard to understand, but I get the contrast. I really do, and I get your point. Because on one hand, the state is helping build these luxury hotels, these luxury developments in Park City around the Jordanelle Reservoir that military people can get a discount for, and that's how they connect it to the military. Meanwhile, military officers at Camp Williams don't have any air conditioning. That's a completely valid point. And I feel what you're saying. My youngest brother spent his entire career in the military. He was in the Green Beret for a number of years. He just retired completely from the military. He was also working for the Department of Defense for a while after being a contractor for a number of years. But he spent a lot of time in Afghanistan. I'll actually have to pull up a picture because he was shot by Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, and there's I'll have to dig this out somewhere, but there's a picture of him in Soldier of Fortune magazine right after he got shot. They had a reporter embedded, and if you don't remember what Soldier of Fortune magazine is, it was something in the 80s and 90s, and it glorified the military, and he grew up reading that. He loved Soldier of Fortune magazine, so he always saw it as a source of pride that there's a picture of him right after he got shot in Afghanistan, in Soldier of Fortune magazine. I'll have to dig that up. I'll share it on a future live stream for y'all. Let's see. What else do we have here on the comments? Let's see. People say, Danette says, I think we need to look into water shares and transparency. Sauce on TikTok says that was nuts with the guy hitting his phone. It was not a good look for Senator Steve Stevenson. Ryan Hi-Fi on TikTok says, funny how the Utah GOP is trying to blame the dissent on paid protesters. Yeah, it really is, but that's their go-to when they're getting this much pushback. And you don't know if we're talking about Kevin O'Leary, Mr. Wonderful, who is behind this data center project, blamed the thousands of people who showed up to protest the data center. He said that they were paid protesters who were bussed in from out of state. Spoiler alert, they probably weren't. And as I pointed out on the Tuesday live stream, really the only time that we've seen that sort of thing happen in such a large scale was January 6th, when Turning Point USA and Charlie Kirk literally bussed in people to Washington, D.C. to protest one of their stop the steal things on January 6th, and a lot of those people ended up attacking the U.S. Capitol. So that's the actual history of this sort of thing happening. It doesn't happen. The only documented evidence we have of it happening was January 6, 2021, and it was Turning Point USA and Charlie Kirk, and they backed away from that real quick after everything went down. They tried to cover up their involvement in that real quick. Let's see. Gabriel on YouTube says, I'm left to wonder, given all these issues coming up around Adams, to what degree his primary opponents are celebrating the new campaign fodder. We talked about this a little bit on Tuesday night. I don't know what impact this is going to play, but it's not going to be none. Because, as I pointed out many times, this is the very first time that Stuart Adams has ever had a primary election in his entire career. In fact, when he was first elected to the Utah House of Representatives back in the 2000s, he was not elected in a regular election. The person in front of him, a member of the House, retired, and he was elected in a special election where delegates were the only ones who had to vote on him. So they put him into the House of Representatives. He stood for re-election once and then decided he wasn't going to run for re-election again. He stepped down and then was appointed the head of the Utah Transportation Commission. And there's a lot of, investigation that needs to be done there. But then I believe it was in 2014, after John Huntsman was appointed the ambassador to China by the Obama administration, and he resigned as governor. Gary Herbert, who was the lieutenant governor, he became the governor. He moved up. He was elevated to the status of governor, and he needed a lieutenant governor. And he tapped then Utah State Senator Greg Bell. And so Greg Bell became the lieutenant governor, which opened up a seat in the legislature, and Stuart Adams just happened to be elected by the delegates to fill that seat, and he has been in the legislature ever since. He's never had a primary. He was forced into his very first primary this year because at least one of his opponents got signatures to appear on the ballot. He also got signatures, but then at the Republican State Convention, because Senate District 7 is a multi-county seat, it covers more than one county. That's why the vote was at the state convention. Adams did win the delegate vote, but he only got 55%, and that allowed Braden Hess to get into the race as well. So it's a three-way primary. So let's talk about what is happening here. Let us talk about the second part of this story. So as we left it, on June 1st, Adams got the 5 biggest checks ever donated to his leadership PAC, the Adams Leadership PAC. He got 5 checks totaling $135,000 from 5 individuals and companies who have business before MIDA, who have business with MIDA, who have gotten contracts with MIDA, who have done work for MIDA, who have profited from MIDA. And they donated these 5 checks, which just happened to be the 5 largest donations ever to his PAC, to his leadership PAC. Then there's another thing. Sorry, I'm listening a little bit because if you didn't come in at the beginning of the show, my dog Murphy, who has been having some health problems, she had a seizure just a couple of minutes before the program started. So I have to keep an ear out to see if anything's happening with her. She seems to be okay after the seizure, but it's not a nice experience. So anyway, earlier this year in January, when it became clear that Adams was likely going to face a primary, his PAC, his Adams Leadership PAC, he transferred $45,000 from his leadership PAC into his campaign committee, into his campaign account. That just happens to be the largest amount of money his leadership PAC has ever given to any single campaign. And I went back and looked. The most he had ever given to another candidate in any cycle, I believe, was the 2024 cycle when he gave $20,000 to $10,000 donations transferred from his PAC to a Republican Senate candidate, Wayne Harper. Up until then, the $20,000 to Wayne Harper was the most amount of money they had ever given to a candidate. Then all of a sudden in January, he gives $45,000 or transfers $45,000 from his PAC to his campaign. That it didn't put a financial strain on his campaign. It had almost $180,000 in the bank coming into the year. So the $45,000 wasn't a financial strain. But these $135,000 donations he got from these companies almost doubled the cash on hand that was in his PAC. I asked him, do you plan on donating any more money, or do you plan on transferring any more money from your PAC to your campaign during the primary? Because he's got a very competitive primary. Stephanie Hollis, the former general counsel for Weber State, one of the candidates, and Braden Hess is the other one. It's a three-way Republican primary. And and that's a legitimate question because he did it before. He took $45,000 from the PAC in January when it was clear that he was probably going to be facing a primary, and he transferred it over to his campaign account, which, as I said before, was the largest ever donation to a candidate from the PAC. It just happened to be himself. So I said, are you planning on moving more money over, especially after you get this $135,000 from these five companies, these five individuals and companies that have business before the board that you chair? Didn't answer. No answer at all. Radio silence. But if he does do that, then you can argue that these people, these companies that have business with MIDA, that are profiting from MIDA, who just gave a bunch of money to his PAC, if he takes money from his PAC and transferred it to his campaign again to support his primary election campaign, you can argue that these MIDA-connected donors are effectively, in some part, underwriting his political survival. You can't look at it any other way. That's a legitimate thing to say if he does transfer money from that PAC to his campaign. There's nothing in Utah law that says he can't do that. That's totally legal. There's nothing in Utah law that says these companies can't give money to him through his PAC. But it is curious that these are the 5 largest donations ever that just happen to be in the same year that he's facing a very tough reelection bid, his toughest reelection bid ever. And he transfers the most money from that PAC to a candidate ever. It just happens to be himself. All of that raises legitimate questions. I even asked him if he thinks, I said, do you think that this sort of relationship, this sort of mechanism, this sort of thing should be illegal? He didn't answer. He did not answer these questions. And it doesn't matter who's asking it. I think that voters deserve an answer to these questions. But he doesn't think that he needs to answer it. And I think it's because he doesn't have a good answer. It's really hard to spin this. So anyway, that's a story that I broke yesterday on UtahPolitics.news. If you read it, if you haven't read it, go over to my new website, UtahPolitics.news. You can read it there. It's free. If you have read it, if you appreciate my work, take a minute and become a subscriber. Sign up for my newsletter. That's free. A bunch of people have signed up for my newsletter after I broke this story. And a good portion of them decided to become subscribers to financially support what I do, because this just didn't happen in a vacuum. It took a while to track down the connections between these donors and MIDA. The first thing I noticed is that it looked really weird to me. I mean, it was really strange that these large donations came in, and then you have to spend time going through old campaign finance reports to see what are the largest donations ever, and if they are the largest donations, then you have to go through and look to see all the money that he's given to other candidates. It was a lot of work to pull this off, but I did it because I think the public deserves to know. So this is my sales pitch to you. If you appreciate that work, if you appreciate what I do, just go over to my website, utahpolitics.news. You can become a subscriber there. It's $5 a month. It's like 17 cents a day. And if you don't want a subscription, think about throwing some money in the tip jar. All of it helps support my work as an independent journalist. Spencer Wins on YouTube says, the silence is deafening. Yes, the silence from President Stuart Adams is absolutely deafening. He doesn't answer these questions. And this is the first time that Stuart Adams has had problems with, ethical conundrums. Do you remember back in the 2022 World Cup when he and his grandkids just happened to show up in Qatar for the World Cup, for the game between the United States and England? That was paid for by the Qatari government. They paid for his trip over there. Again, that's not illegal. But state law also didn't require him to disclose it. And as an interesting side note on that, Representative Candice Perucci for several years has tried to pass legislation that would require elected officials to disclose travel paid for, funded by foreign entities. And the first year she ran it, I believe it made it through the House, but then it didn't go anywhere in the Senate. And who's the leader of the Senate? President Stuart Adams, who tends to have a lot of travel funded by foreign governments. I think he was in Kyrgyzstan last month. I came across some clipping. He takes a large number of foreign trips, and a bunch of it he pays for out of his campaign account, which he pays for it out of his PAC. If you really analyze the spending on his PAC, he doesn't give a lot to candidates. Of all the money he pulls in, a lot of it goes to travel. He came under some trouble. He got in some trouble, or there was some controversy in 2024 about his campaign finance issues. Because what happened was Utah law says that when you are disclosing your spending, you need to disclose the ultimate recipient of the money. You can't, but Adams wasn't doing that for years and years and years. He was just putting American Express, and then there'd be like a $60,000 payment to American Express, and we have no idea what he was spending that money on. And people filed complaints, and at some point he got conflicting messages from the lieutenant governor's office when asked about this. Somebody told him he was told twice in no uncertain terms that he had to disclose the ultimate recipient of the payment. He couldn't just put American Express or whatever credit card he was putting down. But then somebody else told him exactly the opposite. And he chose to believe that he was told the exact opposite and continued doing it. And after the lieutenant governor's office investigated, they said, yeah, you're in violation of this, but we're not going to punish you. Just fix it going forward. Which I guess fair, but there are years and years and years of campaign finance reports. We have no freaking clue what he spent this money on because it was just a large payment to American Express or a credit card company, which is not allowed under Utah law. And Utah law is pretty clear. The law is not vague on this matter. In fact, he voted on the law. He was in the legislature when they passed that law. But the law is pretty clear. He wasn't following it. He got sort of like a slap on the wrist, told don't do it again. But I asked him, this was a legitimate question after we found out from the lieutenant governor's office that they weren't going to do this. They weren't going to punish him. Weren't going to give him any sanctions. I said, are you going to go back and amend your previous disclosures to bring them in line with the law? And what do you guess the answer was? Nothing. Didn't answer the question. So that's the big story that I broke earlier this week on Tuesday. If you haven't read it yet, go over to my website, utahpolitics.news. Let me try to get to some of your other questions and comments. Leave them in the chat if you want to chime in. I want to know what you have to think about our campaign finance laws. If you have thoughts on that, if you have thoughts on President Adams getting these relatively large donations on the same day from companies that are involved in or that have business with a state agency that he runs. I want to know what you have to hear about. I want to hear what you have to say about that. Anita Dalrymple on Facebook says, definitely need to look at water rights. Tooele can't use water rights or lack thereof when it comes to building permits. At some point, we'll run out of enough water for everyone, meaning Tooele cannot deny permits because of concerns for lack of water. As I said on Tuesday, the way it's shaping up is this is going to be a life-changing summer, not only in Utah, but in the West. We just didn't get any snow this year. The NOPAC. And that's going to really force a lot of people's hands on this. That's going to force a lot of people's hands. And I take no pleasure in that. I would like to have the water we need this summer. But everybody's going to suffer from this. Everybody is. Anita Dalrymple says Celeste Malloy went on a Greek vacation with her sister paid for by Greece. I was the one who reported that. It was part of a junket with a number of other members of Congress. She put it in her disclosure, but she and her sister were the ones who took a trip to Greece funded by either the Greece government or a PAC that was involved in Greece. But that, again, not illegal. They just have to disclose it. JK7771 on YouTube says, absurd that foreign governments can do this. Again, it's not illegal. But it is kind of alarming when, the Senate president is taking this trip to Qatar for the World Cup paid for by the Qatari government. And don't forget, former Attorney General Sean Reyes did the same thing. He was over there as well. But you've seen, Adams has traveled all over the place. And some of it is he's funded out of his PAC. Some of it is funded out of his campaign account. But like the Qatari one, that was funded by the Qatari government. But he didn't need to disclose it. The only reason anybody knew about it is somebody posted about it on social media. Ann Celeste says, what do you think about Governor Cox's father being involved in the data center? That is just speculation at this point. There is no evidence. There's nothing to back that up. And if you see people on social media posting that, if you see people on social media talking about that, they don't know what the hell they're talking about. They're just trying to whip up outrage, or they're going off half-cocked because they heard from someone. And the reason I say that is because there are no contracts. There are no contracts. So you can say, oh, Governor Cox's family's business, Centricom, is going to be involved in the data center. Okay, show me a contract. Show me some proof. You don't have any because there isn't any. There's no contract. But a lot of people are trying to whip up outrage, try to get clicks, but there's no evidence. There's been some good reporting on this today. There's no evidence that that is true. So believe it, don't believe it. It's not true. I understand why people would say it, because there's just this undercurrent that everybody's on the take in politics. And it's an assumption that makes some sense when you think about it. It's believable on its face, but there's no evidence to back it up right now. And unfortunately, the politicians who are getting harassed over this and this sort of speculation that pops up, it's their own damn fault, because they've done things in the past that are shady. They've done things in the past that are borderline unethical. And now they can't really start crying when people start talking about, are you on the take for this data center? Well, again, there's no proof that there is. There's absolutely no proof. None at all. But it's an easy leap to make. It takes a leap of logic, but it's an easy leap to make. And it's their own damn fault. It really is. Because they don't answer direct questions. Do you remember when I reported a couple of years ago that the state paid for big security upgrades at Spencer Cox's personal house? They built a big fence around his property. They put a huge gate in. They built a like a guest house sort of thing where his security detail would stay when he's at his farm in Fairview. And the thing is, the legislature hid that appropriation in another bill, and they never said what it was for. It was never disclosed publicly. I had to dig for a long time to figure out what the heck was going on. But it happened. The state paid about $600,000 in taxpayer money to upgrade the security around Governor Cox's personal house in Fairview. And when I was writing the story and getting ready for publication, we sent a list of questions to the governor, and they didn't answer. They gave us just a really anodyne statement. But when we published the story, they had a thread on Twitter locked and ready to go. And it was Spencer Cox crying about how the media is attacking him and we're being so mean to him and boo-hoo. They're making it less safe for my family because they're talking about the security upgrades at my house. That's not the damn issue. The damn issue is that the taxpayers paid $600,000 for those security upgrades, and the legislature hid it from the public because they knew people would get a little bit upset about it. But boo-hoo-hoo, poor me. So when you act like that, when confronted with questions, don't be surprised when people don't believe you or people jump to conclusions when there's a gigantic data center that's being built in northern Utah, and people are like, I wonder if Governor Cox's family business is going to benefit from this. Like I said, there's no proof. There's nothing to back that up, but don't be surprised when people do that. It's your own damn fault that this happens. And then you cry about it on social media or go on Ezra Klein's podcast to cry about it. I cannot wait for the book tour when his book comes out. There's going to be so much poor me. I'm treated so badly and everybody's so mean to each other. And shut up. I don't want to hear it. Let's see. Gabriel on YouTube says, have we considered banning golf courses to start with? That would be a big, good luck with that. I agree with you. I can say that because I'm not a golfer. I don't play golf. I just don't find it's not my sport. I don't have the patience for it. I'm the kind of guy who stands in front of the microwave going, come on. I have no patience for anything. Golf, forget about it. But yeah, golf courses use a lot of water. You know what else uses a lot of water? Agriculture, specifically alfalfa farms here in Utah. Governor Cox, he's an alfalfa farmer. He knows a lot of alfalfa farmers. He doesn't want to talk about that. Lady of the Great Salt Lake says, when they go into public service as a career and can't handle public scrutiny, awkward. I saw a really interesting social media post that said, politicians are not celebrities. They've forgotten their place. That one really stuck with me. That one stuck with me. So let's see. Miss Ruth says, I thought Cox was going to see an inheritance of something like $6 billion. Is that true? I don't know. I can't comment on that. I don't know. I do know, and I've written this story in the past. In fact, I'm the one who wrote the story about Governor Cox's family and the family business. They did get a lot of contracts after he got in office. They did benefit greatly. Quid pro quo? I have no idea. Did Cox put his thumb on the scale? I have no idea. There's no evidence at all. But perception is reality in these cases, you know? Let's see. Serald on YouTube says, as an example, Las Vegas bought back lawns, but golf courses are the primary green spaces. Public parks are not watered. At best, Utah would likely follow the same model. So there's going to be a reckoning coming, or a reckoning coming. There will be a reckoning around water. And it's not going to be nice. It is not going to be nice at all. There's going to be a reckoning about a lot of things. A very good friend of mine, who works for the BBC or has worked for the BBC for years. His name is Michael Goldfarb. And he's got a great podcast. I'm going to put out a shout out for this. His podcast is called The First Rough Draft of History Podcast. So it's FRDHF podcast. Or the FRDH podcast, First Rough Draft of History. And it's a really great podcast. I've been a guest on it before. But he emailed me at the beginning of this year, and he said that 2026 feels like a lot of things are going to come to a head this year for good, for better or for worse. And I believe that. I really do. A lot of things are going to come to head this year. And it's going to be hard to get through it. It's going to be really hard to get through it. Switching topics, Serald says, well, how are prospects looking for Trevor Lee? I don't really have a lot of boots on the ground up there. I do need to go up and spend some time in the district. I did talk about this on Tuesday night. I have noticed that Trevor Lee has been doing a lot of damage control around his work with SB 153, which is the bill that's going to make everybody's voter information public. He was the floor sponsor. Senator John Johnson was the main sponsor of that. And I can tell he's getting a lot of pushback because he is spending a lot of time on right-wing podcasts and speaking to right-wing groups about this bill and trying to explain it. And that just tells me that he's getting a lot of pushback. People are still angry about that. Now, maybe it's been subsumed by the attacks on him over his alleged defrauding of two former employers, and that website that popped up right before the convention. But I'm not sure how that race is going to go. What I can tell you is that I don't think he's as secure in his reelection bid as he would like you to believe. He did not win at convention, which was surprising, and I think it got his attention. But it also, in 2024, he was forced into a primary election, and he only won that by 500 votes. And his opponent that year was Daniela Harding, the former chair of the Davis County Republican Party, and she only lost by 505 votes, I believe. His opponent this year, Bob Stevenson, has a lot more name ID than Daniela Harding does. Representative Lee has not done a lot to endear himself to the moderate Republicans who will be voting in the primary. And, and Bob Stevenson is very well known in the community. So I think it's going to be a really tough hill for him to climb. I don't know what's going to happen in that. I'm not going to make a prediction, but that's where I see that race right now. Let's see. JK says, would you interview experts on the possible effects of the weather conditions around our state this summer, or recommend any Utah-specific sources? I'm going to hold off on making any recommendations right now. There's some stuff coming. I'm working with. I'm going to be speaking with a nationally known journalist, and I'm not going to give it away here, but I'm going to be going on their podcast probably in the next week or two, to talk about the data center issue. This person's also booked some pretty big experts, and I'm going to try to get them on as well. So we will be talking about the environmental impacts going forward, and I'll try to come up with some recommendations. There's one website, I think it's called Grow the Flow. Maybe Lady of the Great Salt Lake, who's on TikTok, can help me with this. But I know there's an organization called Grow the Flow, and they've got some good resources on that. Let's see. Spencer Windows on YouTube says, like with the original progressive movement that arose from the Gilded Age corruption scandals, the country is ripe for a broad populist anti-corruption movement. You're not going to get any disagreement from me there. The problem is we're still so polarized, And the biggest, the biggest mover, the biggest motivator in American politics right now is something called negative partisanship. People don't vote for something; they vote against they vote against the other political party. People do not vote for something; they vote against a candidate. That's the biggest motivator in politics. That's what moves the needle the most is negative partisanship. And as long as that negative partisanship exists, it's going to be really hard to build a coalition out of it. I'm not saying it can't happen, but I think things are going to have to get a lot worse before that does happen. And unfortunately, I think things are probably going to get a lot worse. Spencer says the data center issue really seems to be hitting in a new way politically. It's got all kinds of people who aren't the usual suspects, environmentalists up in arms. I agree with you. I think that a lot of people who are involved in this were not expecting the kind of pushback that they are getting from the public. They're not used to that. They were not expecting it. Unfortunately, Americans have a very, very short attention span, and it's pretty easy to move on to the next outrage. I don't know what this. I don't know what this is going to have legs. It is, but how long those legs last? I mean, there will be people who will still be involved in protesting it and pointing out the problems. But do we move on to the next outrage? Is this the kind of thing that's going to be driving people in November? It's a long time between now and the November election. It's a long time, and things can change. Right now, I would say if we were just in this moment alone, I would agree with you. But, again, you just have to take a long view of this. Other things are going to come up. They're going to outrage people too, and attention is going to get split. And I'm not saying that's a good thing. I actually don't like that, because this is the kind of issue that does deserve extended attention. Hi Pom Pom on YouTube says, I've been reaching out to everyone I can think of to fight back on SB 153. How do I file a lawsuit and get funding for it? We need to fight back. It's a violation of federal and state constitution. I don't know how you get funding for a lawsuit, and I don't know a lawyer who would take that up. It passed with 2/3, and so I'm not sure how you would do that. Serald says, I never hear you mention it, but does Utah Political Watch by chance have merch? I've been thinking about that. I might do something. I can tell you this. And we're in this window where I'm hoping to hear from the 10th Circuit Court any day. If my lawsuit against the legislature goes my way, I'm definitely going to come up with some merch. I am. I have to. I have to do that. So I think that's what I'm waiting for. I haven't really had any ideas. If anybody has any idea of what they would want to do for merch, I'm all ears. You can drop it in the email. My email is right on the screen, or you can send me a DM, so I can do that. Anita Dalrymple says people are worried about running out of water. They are. That is a scary, scary thing. It really is. Water is everything. And I didn't expect Mad Max to become a documentary, just like I didn't expect Idiocracy to become a documentary. So, anyway, Athena Kitty says, can we move to stop voting partisan and start voting for Utah? That would require people to get rid of some negative partisanship. And you still have to remember that Utah is still a majority Republican state. Just over 50% of registered voters are Republicans. And so, that's where you got to start. Republicans. And the other problem is the Democratic brand is so bad here in the state. It really is. The Democratic brand is just not great. Voters in Utah are not selling what Democrats are not buying what Democrats are selling. Unfortunately, for the political atmosphere. I don't say that because I'm a Democrat. I don't say that. I have said in the past that I would like to see the Democratic Party here in Utah do better in elections. And the only reason I do that is because it would make my job more interesting. It would make my job more interesting. But the Republicans have a supermajority in both the House and the Senate. The Democrats don't pass anything unless the Republicans want them to pass it. So it's purely selfish reasons that I would like to see the Democrats do better in elections here in Utah. Unfortunately, people aren't buying it. It's Mar High on TikTok says there's a lot of us that are registered as Republican because it's the only way to make a difference. I will amend that. I will correct you. There are some of you who are registered as Republican because it's the only way to make a difference. But as I've said many times before, there's absolutely no data to back up this assertion that a whole bunch of Republicans are just Democrats in disguise. There's no data to back that up. The people who change their voter affiliation to Republican are independents who want to be able to vote in the Republican primary. That's what the data tells us, and people have done studies on this. So, Utah used to be a Democratic stronghold. It really did. But the Equal Rights Amendment, Roe v. Wade, those are the things that flipped it in the other direction. So, anyway, so to recap, again, we've been talking about this story that I broke yesterday about Senate President Stuart Adams receiving donations from 5 individuals and companies that have business before MIDA, the board that he chairs, and they just happen to give him the 5 largest donations in his PAC's history, totaling $135,000 just a week after the MIDA board voted to approve this data center. You can read the whole story at utahpolitics.news. And I want to stress to everyone, this is just the start of this story. You can go to my website and read that story. There's more coming. I spent all day today doing research, trying to understand some things so that I can report them accurately. And there are some very alarming and hair-raising things that need to be reported about this. And I'm going to spend that time and bring it to you because you deserve to know that. You deserve to know what your government is doing. And this is your government. It is an unelected board with tremendous power, but it is the government. They're mostly unaccountable because they're all appointed. The only person who could face any accountability right now is Stuart Adams because he's facing a primary. And whoever wins that primary has to be considered the favorite to become to win the election in November. So, Lady of the Great Salt Lake says, well, repeated scandals with Adams hold the public attention through November. Adams has a few now. Yes, we've gone over a number of his scandals. I did report even when he was I think first in the legislature, there was going to be a billboard that was going to be put up near his parents' house in Layton, and Adams made a few calls and got it stopped. So he has no compunction using his public office to benefit himself or his family members. There's no compunction at all. He has got a history of doing that. All the way back in the 2000s, there was a billboard that was going to go up near his parents' house, and they didn't find out about it until they were literally digging the hole to put the billboard in, and he made a few calls and got it stopped. It was a UDOT project. Just wild. Anyway. Okay, well, I think that's going to do it for this evening. This live stream. I appreciate everybody's attention. I just wanted to come on here and talk about this story. It's been getting a lot of attention online, and I really appreciate that. I've got a big pop, a lot of traffic to the website, which is fantastic because I always feel good when people read my stuff. I really wish President Adams would have answered my questions, and if he does answer the questions, I will update the story. I always do, but I don't know if he's going to. I don't expect he will. I don't expect him to. I don't think he will. Lady of the Great Salt Lake says, any chance Adams has parents that live in Box Elder and can NIMBY Stratos for us? She laughs, but that's a good joke. That's a good joke. Last thing I wanted to talk about, because I thought this was extremely funny yesterday. YouGov YouGov did a poll, and whoever wrote these poll questions deserves like a Nobel Peace Prize or something because they were fantastic. YouGov polled Americans, and they asked a couple of questions. The first one was, who do you think would win in a physical fight between you and Donald Trump? Now think about that. You there and Donald Trump in a fight. Who would win in a fight? Overall, American adults, 55% said they would win, 19% said Trump would win. Democrats, 75-5 said they would beat Trump in a fight. Independents, 58% said they would win, 11% said Trump would win. But this is interesting. Among Republicans, 39% said Trump would win, only 33% said they would win. Can you imagine being, if that just astonishes me, but it also shows the hold that Trump has on the Republican Party. For 39% of Republicans to look at Donald Trump and his physical condition, which is unmistakable, he is very frail, constantly bruised, to look at Donald Trump and say, oh yeah, Trump would kick my ass in a fight. I cannot fathom that level of delusion. 39% of Republicans said that. Then they asked a follow-up question. Who would win in a fight between an 8-year-old boy and Donald Trump? Overall, 45% of U.S. adults said Trump would win a fight between him and an 8-year-old boy. 54% of Democrats said the 8-year-old boy would win, while only 26% said Trump would win. Independents, 37% said Trump would win, 33% said the 8-year-old boy would win. Among Republicans, 72% said Trump would win in a fight. And I don't know if you saw the video of him doing that presidential fitness thing earlier this week on the lawn of the White House. He took some kids outside and he was demonstrating his putting prowess. Now remember, this is a guy who wins every club championship at his golf clubs. He wins all of them. He wins them all the time. I don't know if you saw the video, but he's trying to show how well he putts. He missed every single putt before he finally just gave up. He's got a bunch of kids standing there. He's like, watch me putt. And he misses every single one. It was hilarious and sad. But I'm sorry. If looking at the physical state of Donald Trump, I think an 8-year-old boy would at least hold his own and if not win. And an adult, I mean, no contest. So I really think whoever wrote these questions, first of all, blessings be upon you and your family forever for whoever wrote these questions and decided to ask them, because they are just mwah. But to be someone, I just cannot fathom being someone who would be asked this question and say, oh yeah, Donald Trump would totally kick my ass. Not at all. Unbelievable. Athena Kitty on TikTok says, I know a few 8-year-olds that would love a chance to fist fight Trump. I think I do too. But, you know, it's not going to happen. It's just wild speculation. Now watch. Somebody's going to take this video and they're going to start saying, Brian Schott of Utah Political Watch is threatening the president. No, I'm not. And you're dumb. You're stupid. Shut up. Anyway, I am not going to read that comment from Athena Kitty on TikTok. Not going to read that. This is trying to be a family show. So anyway, I just wanted to end on that because I thought that was extremely funny. Anyway, thank you so much for your time and your attention this evening. I really appreciate it. If you appreciate what I do, my work, I am an independent journalist, and all of this is funded by my readers, by you. I don't have a corporate owner. I don't have a billionaire backing me. This is my normal spiel. It's funded by readers. And I think that is fantastic. And if you look at these independent publishers, 3 years straight now, an independent publisher like what I do, they're large organizations, but like what I do, they have won a Pulitzer for 3 straight years. I'm part of an organization called Lion, Local Independent Online Network of Local Independent Online Network of Publishers, Lion Publishers. It's an organization that I and Utah Political Watch are part of. And for 3 straight years, one of our members has won a Pulitzer. So independent journalists do good work. And most of them are funded by either they're a nonprofit or they're funded by their readers. And that's the business model that I have. And so I depend on you. And if you want to support my work, I'm just asking you, take a minute, go over to my website. It's utahpolitics.news. You can sign up for my newsletter there. It's free. You'll get most of my journalism sent directly to your inbox. Every time I publish a story, you'll see that in your inbox. Most of that is free. There are some subscriber-only perks there, and that's like $5 a month, $55 a year. And then that allows me to continue doing what I'm doing. And if you don't want a subscription, throw some money in the tip jar if you feel like it. I'm not going to beg you. All the people who are supporting this work right now, I'm so thankful for you. You're allowing me to keep doing what I'm doing. You're allowing me to do the kinds of stories like the one I published yesterday, showing that Senate President Stuart Adams got a bunch of money from companies who have business before this board that he chairs. And that takes time, that takes resources, that takes effort to do that sort of thing. And I can only do it because of the people who support my work. And if you want to become one of them, you can go to my website, utahpolitics.news. So anyway, thank you so much for your time and your attention this evening. I appreciate you joining this. If you have any questions, send me a DM on any of these apps. Follow me on any of these apps. Follow me on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, anywhere that you can find me. Just give me a follow. You can send me a DM. I'll answer you there, or you can email me. My email is on the screen. I love hearing from you, and I want you to reach out to me. So that's going to do it this evening. Thank you so much for your time and your attention. As I said before, have a great evening, and we'll do this again soon. Bye.